so much for being here. It's so lovely to see you all of your beautiful faces here. I'm Emma Bullimore. I am so excited to be hosting this session. Welcome to the Sky Documentaries panel, Does Length Matter? Making Short Docs That Count. We have the most incredible panel for you. I can't wait to get chatting to them. Let me introduce you to them. These three here are incredible filmmakers that between them have a very enviable CV, a very enviable awards cabinet as well. And we're going to be talking a bit about their work. They're going to give you some insight into the kind of work that they've been doing, the kind of work that they've done to get shorts made as well. And we're also going to hear about Sky's brand new fund that could get your short made. So lots to discuss today. Let me introduce you. We have Cherish here, Cherish Otkea, who's a BAFTA-winning documentary filmmaker and director of The Black Cop, which we're going to see a little bit of in just a moment. We also have Elena, Andreicheva, Academy Award and BAFTA-winning producer and filmmaker. We're going to see a little clip of her Oscar-winning short, Learning to Skateboard in a War Zone, which is just spectacular. We also have Lindsey with us, Lindsey Dryden, hello. Emmy-winning director and producer of Trans in America. I told you they've got amazing awards, amazing stature between them. Poppy is here, Poppy Dixon as well, director of documentaries and factual at Sky. If you want a TV Choice Award, anything, or
couple of awards.
Yeah, along the way. Thank you so much for being here. I'd like to talk to you first, Poppy, just because it's a Sky session, and it's been the most incredible couple of years for Sky Documentaries. Just to put it into context a bit, tell us a little bit about why you're so proud to work in this area and the kind of things you've been doing.
That's very kind of you to say. And thanks everyone for coming. This is an amazing turnout. We're really, really happy to have you all here. Sky Docs is 2 years old, pretty much this month, and it's been a really exciting couple of years. We've put out a huge sort of vibrant, diverse mix of projects, and we've got some really exciting stuff to come. I guess to sort of set the scene of what we think of ourselves as at Sky Docs and what we look for, we like to think of the channel as a sort of destination in the UK for feature documentaries and premium limited series. So really what we focus on is really narrative-driven storytelling. So we really look for those strong stories made with like a really clear directorial vision. We really embrace working with, both the sort of award-winning top-of-the-game directors, but also emerging talent, and we've given lots of kind of first-time and emerging directors their first gigs, and we'll be continuing to do that.
I think we should have a little look, don't you? I think we should see the kind of work that's been presented. If our wonderful friend at the back could show us our sizzle reel. The breadth on display there, from Britney to Mother Teresa. You tick every box, right?
Well, yeah, we look for those sort of really kind of compelling, provocative stories, those characters that you think you know, but we're going to just take you that little bit deeper and sort of tell you something you've not heard before. It's really great to see it all sort of, that's probably about the last 12, maybe 14 months, and then plus, a few sneak peeks of, you're the first people actually to see little snippets of some of the stuff we've got coming up this summer and autumn. So yeah, no, it's really, we're really proud of everything that we've done. You saw a little clip of Liverpool Narcos there, which I think people were really surprised by, because you sort of read something that has Narcos in the title, you think it's going to be one thing. It was really creatively inventive. It was really nuanced, and it was a retrospective story that was told in a really kind of dynamic it felt very present tense, even though everything they were talking about was from sort of 20 years ago, and we're really proud of that. That actually won our first BAFTA for the channel, and then we also won an award, the Broadcast Digital Best Factual Channel Award, which was, we were really proud of that, because we'd only been up and running for about a year when we got that. So yeah, hoping to keeping up the good work.
And we're here today specifically to talk about shorts. Tell us about this fund, because this is really exciting.
Yeah, and this is a massive departure for us, and for me as well as an individual. I've not really worked in the world of shorts before, but it feels like we get pitched a lot of projects, and many of them just don't fit into that 90-minute or sort of multi-part series format. And we just started thinking, it's kind of twofold, really. We started thinking, how can we tell these amazing stories? And also, how can we find ways to nurture new talent and bring new talent into the industry? And so we've launched this fund. We launched it perhaps a month or so ago. And it's, excuse me, we've got about we have £500,000 to spend. And that will be spread across a number of shorts. We're not setting a particular number because we understand that different films need different budgets and different have different needs. So it'll be sort of probably anywhere between 3 and 6 films that we'll make with that fund. We're particularly targeting where we see a particular need at the moment for new voices in the director's chair. So we're targeting this particular fund this year at both people who face barriers to entry due to disability, and then also black and ethnic minority directors. And really we're looking for people who haven't yet had a broadcast hour. So you may have directed a short before, you may have directed 10 shorts before, that's okay. We're looking for people who haven't had a chance for their sort of full-length piece of work to be shown on TV or on a streamer. And we're looking for sort of the films to be up to 30 minutes, probably sort of 10 to 30 minutes, but if you have a wonderful idea that might only be 5 or 6 minutes, feel free to send it in. We're all ears.
And how restrictive are you in terms of subject matter, or not at all?
We're really open. I mean, generally for Sky Docs, we do have sort of pillars. I mean, we commission a lot into sports, cultural icons, crime, kind of news-adjacent contemporary history, and then the sort of stranger-than-fiction stories. Those are the kind of pillars we commission into for our kind of broader slate. I think for the shorts, we can be, I mean, it's all of that, plus sort of anything you want to say. We will probably prioritize films that are telling a story. It's really important to us, and we want to kind of nurture you and support you. We'll be partnering everybody up with a production company who will, exec and produce the film for you. So you'll have all of that, rigorous support on your budgeting, your scheduling, your compliance, your legal, all of that. And so, I think it sort of makes sense for us to make shorts that are kind of sort of exercising those tools and the sort of storytelling you might use when you move on to producing full-length sort of features and series. But having said that, what we don't do on Sky Docs normally is a sort of a profile of somebody without a journey. And I think a lot of short films do tend to be a kind of snapshot or a profile of a character. We are open to those kind of shorts. I think they work really well in the short form, but we do want to see some sort of journey. We don't just want to sort of be kind of land somewhere for 10 minutes and not sort of see some change and some growth. So that's important to us.
That is the most incredible opportunity, though, not just to have the funding, but to have the support as well. I mean, that's not often that you get that kind of opportunity.
No, and I tell you what, the industry are clamoring. Like, we've had so many really great production companies email us and say, we want to support this initiative. We want to, and they're, some directors are pitching us with a company in mind that they already know, that they might want to work with, but you don't need to have that. We'll do the partnering up, and we've got some great people wanting to help.
Well, talking of great people, let's also speak to the rest of our panel, because we've got some amazing work to talk about. Cherish, we're going to start with a clip of your film, The Black Cop. Would you maybe like to set it up for us a little bit?
The Black Cop explores the experiences of a former Met police officer and his dynamic of being both a victim and perpetrator of racism within the police force. And so this scene is quite pivotal for him because it's when he fully understands what he needs to do to fit in to the Met, or what he feels he needs to do to fit into the Met.
Fabulous. Could we have a look, please? An incredibly powerful story. Why did you decide that a short was the best way to get that across?
Yeah, well, shorts were really a lifeline for this story, to be honest. We initially wanted it to be a feature because there was just so much that happens in his journey. And we tried and failed for 4 years to get it commissioned, and we took it everywhere you can imagine, and there was interest, but there was just no commitment. And so I thought a short could act as a calling card for the film, and hopefully lend itself well to a feature or a longer project being made about it.
And that's just indicative of this kind of tenacity that you have to have as a filmmaker. You know, at no point did you think, oh, I'll just leave it then. You knew the story had to be told.
Yeah, I mean, I was actually just going to make it independently, but I thought for it to, because there's just so many different parts to it, I felt like I needed the funding to access archive, to do like reenactments, just to give it a sense of quality as well. But yeah, the story was always going to be told through film. It was just a matter of time, for real, yeah.
And when you saw the final version, when you'd made the final version, did you feel it worked as a short, or did you feel, oh, I wish I had that much more time?
It was really like complicated because there's so much that is covered, like from him being a child of the foster care experience, or his experience as a Met Police, or just generally being a black person, and that kind of like navigating being a black person in white institutions, and then him also being a gay man. So there's a lot of ground to cover, and it spans decades as well. So it was always going to be like a toss-up between something that's just so complicated that it just doesn't work, or something that, you know, we focus on a simple kind of through line of just acceptance and the journey to find that within yourself, and weave in the layers and the nuances with that. So yeah, ultimately I'm glad that it all came together, but it was a real, because I was just so close to it, I wasn't sure if it would translate or if it would be too complicated.
That's it. How do you manage to be so concise? Is it just a question of discipline or letting things go? How do you do that?
Great execs, to be honest. Great execs, because there's loads of like, it's great to have conversation with people that aren't as close to it, because I've been working on it for 4 years, trying to get off the ground, and to me every single part of it is valid. So having a fresh pair of eyes on it, and having that conversation, just going back and forth about what we can lose, and then losing things and being like, actually we miss it. So like just doing that was super helpful.
Elena, your film is also an incredible piece of work, learning to skateboard in a war zone. Would you like to set up the clip we're going to see?
Sure, yes. So it's learning to skateboard in a war zone if you're a girl, which is crucial. And this is a film that I produced, directed by Carol Deisinger. And it's a film about girls in Kabul, Afghanistan, having the courage to go to school.
Wonderful footage there. It's just gorgeous. So, but again, I imagine that going there, seeing that kind of situation, how do you condense it into a short? Why was a short the right way to tell this story?
Well, I think with this film, we were operating from the point of having a commission for a short film from A&E Indie Films. So we were that was the task at hand. But I think also knowing that we would be operating in a challenging environment. So there was sort of the two sets of restrictions, the security of the team, but also the security of the contributors. This was filmed in predominantly 2017, obviously before the Taliban came back to power. We had restrictions like we couldn't film in private homes, too frequently or for too long. And we couldn't stay anywhere for that long either. So I think we realized and we recognized that what we'd be looking at making would be a snapshot of a time in these girls' lives, but this time was super formative, and that still had legs, you know what I mean?
And that must require you to be so agile as a filmmaker, and to let ideas go and pick up new ideas if you can't stay too long in one place.
Well, yes, there was a lot of, oh dear, we've got to go in 10 minutes, and you have to leave, because this isn't just, the cinematographer, Lisa Rensler, said to me once, she said, wow, it isn't like a normal shoot where someone tells you you've got to leave in 5 minutes and then you leave in 20. You have to go. So you do adjust, and obviously it's very important that you do that. But I think, I think with shorts, sometimes, you have an idea of what you might be able to film, and you try and, create your structure, but it's documentary. So you absolutely have to adapt to what you have in the ground. Some of the access that we had was maybe not as, the variety of access was not as big as we might have anticipated. We did not have as much access to the homes of some of the young girls that you see there that we would hope that you would kind of think as a filmmaker, oh yeah, we'll go home and do some filming with them. That wasn't on the table. So we had to think, what can we create that's still really compelling, that's set at the school? And actually, in the end, that school and that environment and that feeling of the shelter and this environment where the girls can be like this, that actually made the film.
And how hard is it, I'm going to ask you this as well, Cherish, how hard is it to have your professional head on when you're dealing with such emotive subject material?
Would you like to go first?
Yeah, it's super hard. Is my mic on? Yeah, it's definitely challenging, and I made a film about a friend as well, so, we've shared a lot with each other over time, but as we approached making the film, I was having to kind of, shift in a way, still be there for him as a friend, but also he's sharing things that I'm personally impacted by. We belong to the same communities, but I was kind of having to compartmentalize that and just be a blank canvas and be open. He's got really difficult parts of his journey, especially being a perpetrator of racism in the police, and I've had my engagements with the police and so have my family and friends. So it was really trying to come at it from a space of like neutrality and compassion, and also allow myself to feel my feelings, but not letting it get in the way of what we were doing.
Elena?
Yes, sorry, thanks. I think the hardest thing was feeling like we were kind of doing right by, our contributors. Obviously, the context now is that, it's a very, very difficult time for women and for girls in Afghanistan, and it's difficult to watch that and think, they don't have those opportunities anymore. But obviously, we didn't know that then, and it was still extremely important to make sure that we were taking on board everything in terms of their safeguarding. And we were working with an organisation called Sky Documentaries, which runs the school and the project. And we had to take our cue from them. And as a filmmaker, again, sometimes you're tempted to kind of push a little bit. Certainly in, I think, British television sometimes, hard access is, kind of a bit of a badge of honour. But I think on this project, I actually did learn, I kind of got to push back. And in retrospect, it was a very good thing and a nice rebalancing thing for me as a filmmaker. But yeah, there was that consideration at all times.
Lindsey, let me bring you in. Creator of another absolutely remarkable film, Trans in America. Could you set this clip up a little bit for us, please?
Yeah, sure. So Trans in America is a series of 3 short documentaries. They were another commission. They were with the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU. And this is the first of 3 short documentaries. This one's called Texas Strong. This is a very, very brief trailer. And it's about a little girl called Kai in Texas who is trans and who was discriminated against in her school and forced to use bathrooms that weren't appropriate for her. And it was reflective of the bathroom bill that was, being debated and imposed in Texas and other places. And the commissioning brief was not to tell sort of soft light stories to humanize trans people, as so often happens, but to find unfolding stories where there's a real narrative that we can follow. So this is a very brief clip from that short film directed by Andreicheva and produced by me.
Fantastic. Could we have a look? So again, for you, Lindsey, were you left wishing you had more time, or do you think that a shorter form actually served this story?
So these films were supposed to each be sort of 3 to 5 minutes in length, and then they were 15 to 18 minutes in length when they were finished. And that's because we had the freedom from the ACLU to find where the story went. And then we took them and offered them to Condé Nast as a platform. And it's actually been really interesting because, unlike many other films of mine, you can see the audience. So they're on a Condé Nast YouTube platform. So you can see that there's been 5 million views of that film and that there's been 6.5 million views of the entire series. And you can see people having conversations. And that was a really interesting part of the process. So actually we had this sort of wonderful editorial freedom, even though it was a commission, which was rare and brilliant.
And what's it like working, you know, we saw a clip of a Janet Jackson documentary, and if you're doing that, you've got more time and breathing space. This is an issue that is so now, it couldn't be more now. So what's it like working on that kind of subject matter?
I think that's an interesting question. I was approached to produce this series as a queer filmmaker because at that point a few years ago, there may not have been as many recognizable trans filmmakers as there are now. And I wouldn't produce these films now because I wouldn't be the right person to. And there'd be people with the right experience and the lived experience to do that. So I feel tremendously lucky to have been involved in that process. And it was a queer-led team, and we built a kind of trans-led decision-making process. So we had an advisory board of amazing trans storytellers who may not work in film or may not have made documentaries before, but who really knew what they were talking about, you know, on 18 different levels. And when they gave feedback, we committed to making changes based on what they said. You know, it's complicated watching material of a child before she transitioned. And that was a huge challenge ethically, because was that her decision? Was that her parents' decision? And it was our trans advisors who said, this is the way to do this properly. We think it's important that you show this. So yeah, it was about kind of bringing the right people to make those decisions. But I wouldn't be one of the right people anymore, and I'm really comfortable with that. I think that's a great thing.
And what about the question I asked Elena and Cherish about emotional attachment? How did you find that working on this project?
So I don't know if it happens to other filmmakers, but when I'm working with contributors, I tend to dream about them all the time. And I tend to dream about all the terrible ways I might ruin their lives as a result of being involved in filmmaking, because it's tremendously, you know, we are bringing something new to their world that will affect them in a particular way. So I think it's a very emotional process. We did have very, very clear editorial requirements, which is different to, you know, when I'm making feature docs independently, you're following a story and you know, you're seeing what might happen, but the ACLU knew what they wanted. So we had some quite firm guidelines, and that actually made the emotional easier because we could be really clear. But there's certainly things that we didn't anticipate. The press coverage of the series was very complicated, and it prioritized the cute white child and deprioritized the complex black women involved in the other programs. And that was really problematic and something that we didn't predict in enough time. So I think, you know, the emotional isn't just about sort of how it feels and what you're concerned about, but also what are the real impacts of the experience that people are going to have as a result of being involved in the film. So it was a very intense experience over a couple of years, yeah.
It seems that it's equally a responsibility and a privilege to tell these stories.
Yeah, I think that's the nature of making any films, isn't it? It's being lucky enough that you might be allowed into people's lives and recognizing that you will have an impact in some way, and what's a positive impact and an empowered one for the people that you're working with.
Elena, Cherish, do you have sleepless nights as well, worrying about making sure you tell these stories in the right way?
Yeah, I mean, particularly for this story, because he was putting himself out there in a way that is just so vulnerable. And yeah, I definitely had a lot of conversations with him just to make sure that he 100% understands all the different kind of outcomes there could be with us sharing this story. And he very much wanted to share his story. So yeah, I definitely was very... Yeah, it was a difficult one to navigate, just because you make the story and put it out, then you have no idea how people are going to receive it, and will they be able to really recognize that he's changed and just how he feels about his decisions now. So yeah, it was definitely a challenge.
Elena, I can't imagine being in that kind of country, knowing that you're taking the story to a completely different part of the world, girls that don't understand, you know, the nature of this kind of documentary. What's that be like for you?
Yeah, I mean, obviously in our case, there's a huge kind of risk to the protagonists, and now, you know, more than ever. And in fact, you know, we've not really been speaking and showing, you know, the film too much because we don't really want to, you know, interfere with whatever projects might be ongoing to, you know, to safeguard those opportunities that they were given. In what now feels probably like a past life. But I think, you know, for me, yeah, I mean, I've definitely had some sleepless nights about, you know, is this the right thing to do? And I think it's just kind of, I guess for me, I just, you know, try and follow a protocol, which is that, you know, the first thing absolutely has to be, as Cherish was saying, somebody's kind of desire to speak. And I think as documentary filmmakers, sometimes it's kind of really obvious, isn't it? You meet somebody and you really do feel like, wow, this person really does want to put themselves out there in their story. But obviously the caveat with that is it's informed consent, and when you're working with contributors who are, you know, umbrella term, but vulnerable, then it is your job and the team's job, not just me individual, but I think, you know, a broader team, you know, a wise exec, you know, etc., to really help guide and steer that. Because, and you want to feel like you've done everything you possibly could, knowing the circumstance on the ground, even though, you know, we're now in a world where things are very different in Afghanistan. I still feel like at the time we made the right decisions about how we, you know, what we filmed, you know, how we, you know, whose face we showed, whose face we didn't show, and kind of how we navigated that. Even though it, yeah, I mean, maybe we shouldn't have made the film at all, really, when you think about it.
It's a question, isn't it, that you'll continue to have. On the board it says, does length matter? I was interested by what you said, Lindsey, about it was supposed to be 3 to 5 minutes, and then it was 15 to 18, but it wasn't 21 to 24, or you know, you had to stop somewhere. So what is your take on that?
I think in an ideal world, you follow the shape of the story and where it's going, and you have the opportunity to give it what it needs, the space that it needs. And I mean, it's funny, I was talking to some producers on the way over here, and you mentioned shorts, and producers often go, oh God, so creative, so much hard work for so little reward as a producer, certainly very little money as a producer. But I love shorts. I love making them, I love watching them, I love being involved in accessing a story that doesn't need to be 90 minutes. And so I think the ideal scenario is having the space to find what a story needs. And then, you know, in some cases, so we created contracts for the directors on this series so that if they wanted to develop other longer projects with the material, they could, from a rights point of view. And, you know, Cherish, the director of that film, went on to make a film called Mama Bears, which just came out this year, which is about evangelical Christian mums who learn to accept their queer children and then become kind of pseudo-mums for other people. And, you know, there are definitely stories that last longer, but I love the sort of format of finding the right length for a short and letting it breathe and letting it be an artistic experience, but knowing that it's going to end after 20 minutes or 30 minutes or 5 minutes, you know. Some stories can be told in a really short form, and that's wonderful. I would watch 20 shorts every day if I could.
Elena, would you echo that? You were nodding.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was lucky to have the time to watch some shorts this morning, and I definitely reconnected with documentaries in that session. I really, really enjoyed them, and they're all really different. And I was kind of reminded of, you know, why I like the medium. Number one, sometimes they kind of feel like they can just skip, you know, from one scene to the next, where maybe if there was a longer running time, maybe there'd be like a scene that had like someone's like literally drives from A to B, and I like the skip because it's a little puzzle and it doesn't tell you everything. And I just thought, wow, that's so delicious, that's super nice. And also that there's a kind of a jig, yeah, it's sort of going with the theme of the sort of the audience being more engaged in a way, because I think they pass the baton over to you sometimes, and you have to engage more in a way. And that's how I found myself reacting to, you know, to some of the shorts I watched this morning, and I really thought, yeah, wow, you know, that's where they can be amazing.
Cherish, I know you started out wanting more time, but did you discover a love for the shorter form?
Yeah, I mean, most of my career I've been making shorts, so I do really enjoy, just like you said, making and watching them. And like, there was a point in time a few years ago where I was just noticing on platforms where it felt like they were dragging stories out, and you'd get like a 10-part series about something that should be like 3 parts. At best, I'd rather it be short and punchy and impactful and have a good pace than be too long in a way. So yeah, I definitely enjoy shorts, and I'm on the jury this year for the short competition at DocFest, and it's been great to just watch how you can play with form in shorts in a way that feels almost impossible with longer form projects, just because like audiences are so primed to engage with things in this particular way. But when it's a short and it's experimental, it just feels like there's a bit more room to play, and it's been really nice to watch how people are just articulating stories in such a different way.
I totally relate to what you're saying about things being too long. And for you, you know, this must be, you know, a sort of a solution to a problem that must come up, you know, people being a bit scared to edit or be brutal.
Well, absolutely, and I do think people's viewing habits are changing. I mean, people are watching stuff on their phones now, or they're watching, you know, stuff like while they're making a cup of tea, and I just think it's great to offer up, you know, a whole range of different lengths, and like these guys are saying, like really have the creative freedom to tell stories in different ways. I mean, I do think a short I don't think just because it's short we should expect that people will stick with it. I think people will still just give up in the same way that they might with a feature length or a series. So I do think you still need to grab the audience really quite quickly. And, you know, you can do that through amazing characters. You know, I think that's and all of these films have amazing characters. But what they all also do is they move you, you know, and I think I think just because a short doesn't have an hour and a half to sort of take you on an emotional journey, you can move people, you can make them feel something, and it may be sadness, but it may also be joy. You know, I love a comedy short doc. You know, I love something that just has this amazing kind of twist and makes you laugh at the end of it. You know, so I think there's you know, you can really play around with genre in shorts.
And you said at the beginning that this is quite a new journey for you. You're kind of dipping your toes in the water in a way. Has it been quite an enlightening experience so far?
Well, I haven't actually even opened the inbox yet to look at what we've been pitched. So, I mean, I understand that there's quite a few in there already. But yeah, so I mean, I'm enjoying the process. I've seen a few of the shorts here this weekend, and I've been I'm on the board of the Griersons, and I'm on the sort of the review panel for the shorts there as well. So myself and my team, Janine, who's here as well, who's running this program with me, we're really immersing ourselves, and it's just been a joy actually to sort of watch what people have made over the last few years.
And having worked so hard in such, you know, emotive environments, what do you think is the key to making a good short, to making something that will connect with an audience in a short space of time? Are there any lessons that you could draw yet, Cherish?
I would say it's the same thing across the board, because it's just like storytelling. Like, is it a good story? Do you have compelling characters? Is it executed creatively as well? I would say it's the same thing, but yeah, you do have the limitations of time. So that's not to say you can't explore complicated themes, but it's just being aware of that limitation and really homing in on what the whole point of the project is. But ultimately, I'll just say it's a different length, but the things that are important for a series or a single or a feature are still important for shorts.
Lindsey, you're nodding.
I mean, you said all of the things. Yeah, I think it's about characters that you just can't look away from, that you desperately want to spend time with. And that question of whether people switch off is a really interesting one. It could be a 5-minute short, but if it doesn't take you with it, then, you know, the people might not stick with it. And it was interesting with Trans in America that they were supposed to be shorter. And we were all quite nervous about whether they'd land and whether people would stick with the stories. But the reason they were that length is because that's how the stories unfolded. And we found, interestingly, with the data that we had access to, that people did stick with them, even though 15, 18 minutes at the time feels like quite a long short. on an online platform. And so I think, yeah, if there are compelling characters you just don't want to leave, that you really want to spend time with, who you're curious about. They don't have to be likable necessarily, but people that you want to spend time with, then it's the same as any kind of filmmaking. All about people.
Elena, when you're watching shorts this morning and when you watch shorts in general, what are the things that stand out that make you think that's what makes a successful short?
Well, I think, obviously time is precious for everybody. So, shorts that really get me, I find that they, they're thought through carefully so that when you start watching them, because of the time restriction, there isn't, a ton of exposition that is kind of heavy and a little bit kind of, I don't want to say ultra traditional, because traditional can be very good, but hopefully you'll understand what I'm saying. And so they kind of open with a lot of texture, and they open with characters in a space where that kind of speaks to the subject. So you don't need to explain what it is. You know what I mean? So that's kind of what I was really seeing, that things that really landed. And of course it really helps with the running time and with the general kind of style of the film, because you don't want to spend the first 3-5 minutes it being sort of one thing and then all of a sudden segue into an intense obstock, even though the first bit's been a sort of a intro essentially. So I think with a short doc being quite rigorous about that, and even asking like, what could this be? I mean, we were very fortunate with learning skateboard, and also If You're a Girl, that I think the first thing we filmed was a scene in the classroom, and it just so happened, we found out later when it was translated, that they were talking about courage. And it's really poignant, because they're saying, we need courage to just show up here. And that's kind of the opening, isn't it?
But how incredible is that to be there not knowing that you're getting your key scene? I mean,
well, yes, it's a bit unfortunate. And I also would say that in terms of, being the producer in a project like this, at this time, I think it was one of the recce's actually where this was filmed. But afterwards, two very important team members came on board just as the project developed, who were Dari speakers, and could then just be in the environment and operate, and essentially was super integral in getting the film made and the girls to be as comfortable as they were. So the Afghan women involved in making this film really did make it. But obviously it puts me in that sort of funny position of, oh, and should I have been the one to produce it? And as ever, I think you have to ask yourself that question.
And Lindsey, I was really interested by what you were saying about reaction, when you can see comments and you can hear conversations that are happening and see media pick up. How challenging is it to let it go and let it be received how it's going to be received?
It's an interesting one, because I think for many of us, we're making films that we want to be impactful in some way, but that doesn't mean you have to run an impact campaign, for example. And with other films, like a feature-length doc called Unrest, we spent 2 years planning the impact campaign, a year delivering it, and at that point you're quite happy to let it go, and for it to move off into other places. And also I think sort of impact and how stories land with audiences, that's best managed by the communities that it's most precious to and that it most affects. And so with the Trans in America series, we were quite shocked by how positive a lot of the comments were, because these can be very complex spaces. But people were having the conversations there that we hoped that they would. They were talking about how they hadn't ever understood something before, or they hadn't realized something before. So it was actually a wonderful experience in many ways, being able to see it take on its own life. And very different to some of the other work that I've done, where you're much more involved for a very long period of time. It was wonderful.
How about you, Cherish? Because you're so personally involved with this piece, and then to put it out there.
Yeah, there was a lot at stake, and we had no idea how it was going to be received. And being able to engage with comments is like brilliant and super useful. Just to see it, there was a much more positive response. Like, it was the response that I was hoping for him and for this project. And it was great to see people having their own conversations as well online, which is really interesting. So that's kind of the strength of shorts and digital together, is just that. And for your filmmaking practice as well, like you get to engage with the audience outside of like being at film festivals where everyone speaks a certain kind of language, where it's just like the everyday person just going on YouTube and writing what they think about your work. Yeah.
Poppy, do you eventually see shorts sitting alongside features very comfortably on Sky Documentaries?
Yes, I mean the plan initially is for these shorts that we're going to be making over the next year to sit on the platform. I mean, whether we start acquiring shorts or sort of going bigger with it, I don't know yet. Watch this space.
It's exciting because, as you say, anything could be in that inbox. It could be hilarious. It could be heartbreaking. It could be anything.
Yeah, no, we're really excited about it. It means we can make more projects. We can work with different people. We're just looking forward to meeting some new talent and then hopefully building a relationship with them that can progress to doing whether it's more shorts or features or whatever else comes next.
And it's still very much open, the deadline.
Yeah,
we
so
haven't
the
reached
deadline
it yet.
is the 17th of July, Sunday the 17th, for this initial round. I mean, just to say, we're keeping it fairly loose, so if you have an amazing idea for a short later in the year, you should send it in, because we want to be quite fluid with it. We're setting an initial deadline. We may spend all the money then if we get 6 or 7 amazing ideas, but I think no one knows when they're going to stumble across that incredible idea. So we just want to keep that line of communication open, and but yeah, encourage you to send the ideas in soon.
Well, what struck me when we spoke before this is that this is from a genuine want to have this kind of material. It's not just a kind of gimmicky scheme. You really want to encourage these kind of filmmakers. So that kind of fluidity is so helpful.
Yeah, it genuinely is. I mean, we genuinely want to play around with form and to try and to tell some stories that we otherwise wouldn't tell, and we genuinely want to meet and work with some new talent. So. Yeah.
Well, I think it might be your turn to ask questions now, because I could talk for ages, but I feel that it's time to hand over. And we're going to have mics going around, and there's a gentleman at the back who had his hand up first. If you could get one to him. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the discussion. It's really, really wonderful to see like a resurgence of short films being put into the fray, because they're always my favourite. In terms of the funds, I guess it's a bit of a technical question. Where in the process are you looking to pick people up? So let's say instead of right at pre-production, they're maybe halfway through or a quarter through and still a little bit filming. Would that be considered, or is it right at the beginning?
I mean, we're generally looking for projects that are at the beginning. But what I would say is if you've shot something, but you haven't got the funds to finish it, or you want it to become something bigger, or, I think you should still apply, is what I would say. Because, as long as we can still help shape the project and there's still a value in attaching the filmmaker with a production company and an exec producer and a producer, then, I think I would say, I think if your film's already at a rough cut stage, that feels a little bit sort of late in the process. But if you've already started filming, that's great. Send us send us a little taster of what you've shot as part of your pitch.
Thank you very much. And next question. Yes, this gentleman here.
Hi, I absolutely love shorts, so this has been a really fascinating panelist. I really appreciate all you contributing. As an editor myself, one of the things I'm trying to understand is, I suppose people who work with feature-length editors, is there like a mentality change between going from a short to a full length if you're working with a feature-length editor? Myself, I love shorts. I just edit shorts all the time. I dream about editing shorts, production, post-production person. And yeah, so if I was to work with a feature-length editor, what can I expect?
Lindsey?
I think one of the joys of shorts is that it's less to hold in your mind for weeks or months on end, and one of the complexities about features is obviously that there are more threads, right? There's more to kind of hold and spin and weave, but it's the same. I'd say it's the same process. You just need more space, and sort of there are more arcs to the process, and there are more arcs to the story. But overall, I don't think it's a different mentality necessarily. If you're a great storyteller, then that's true at short or feature length. Feature length just make you more tired and distressed. And I think it's sort of easier the threads sort of disappear off in their own directions, and then you have to see if they're coming back or maybe they're not. And yeah, it's a tougher process to hold, but it's the same process.
Elena, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a lot of much longer length film experience, but I think, yeah, the with shorts, the editors that I've worked with, the editors that I've collaborated with, they, I remember one of them saying to me once, because I really wanted to have the scene, I couldn't get the scene, I just could not get the scene. It was the first time somebody's meeting somebody, you know, the sort of thing. And I was really upset about it, and I was thinking, how do I fix this in the film? And this is not Learning Skateboard, this is a different film I made about a Polish immigrant called Polish Go Home. Anyway, and he was like, don't worry about it, because it leaves that space for the audience to kind of imbue this later meeting with even more. And it was, I guess it was kind of both forgiving, but also, yeah, it was just kind of creative. And I really loved that. You know, you don't need to have every single sort of thing, every single thing spelled out. There's kind of creative leaps, I guess.
Cherish, did you want to add?
Yeah, what they said basically. But yeah, I think with shorts, and particularly with shorts on digital platforms, and just like speaking to the fact that audiences, yeah, the habits have changed. I feel like when you're going into a short, there's the expectation that it's going to be quite, just this whole thing of like having to grab people quite early on, whereas when I watch features or just longer form projects, there's a bit more breathing room at the top quite often. Is what I found. There still needs to be that hook, or it feels like there needs to be that hook at least, but it's a lot more succinct with a short. I haven't moved on to features yet, but just as a audience member and as a doc lover, these are kind of things that I've picked up.
Yeah, thank you very much. Another question. Yes, at the back.
Hi, thanks for the panel. I had a question as to how important is it that it's primarily English language, and do the films have to have a sort of UK footprint? Is that important to the shorts that you want to commission?
I would say they don't necessarily need to be English language, but they do need to really resonate for our British audience. I mean, this is what we say when we're commissioning for the channel in general, that it can't feel too sort of local, too small, too elsewhere. I appreciate that there are wonderful films made about incredible kind of cultures and people, but it needs to really have something sort of truly universal that really, really speaks to a British audience as well.
Thank you. Another question? Yes, good. Yeah.
Sort of along those lines, but I know that the world of shorts is evolving, and you've had shorts on US-based platforms. Do you think that there's a lot more opportunities to get shorts on platforms? You know, is the world of distribution getting bigger? Could you even see your shorts sitting alongside features in the cinema? Has that been discussed? Yes, it's kind of more along the distribution lines.
Lindsey.
Do you want to go, Poppy?
Oh, okay.
Well, I mean, I'm not outselling shorts to the wider industry, so I wondered if you might want to take that, actually.
I think there are brilliant shorts platforms in a range of places. Obviously, in the UK, there's places like The Guardian. In the US, there's Field of Vision. There's lots of places that are making amazing work and investing in amazing work. I think the challenge is whether that's seen as purely a talent development opportunity. You know, a short is what you do before you do something more important. My point of view is that shorts are deeply valuable in and of themselves. We don't see that necessarily in how distributors work. We also don't see that necessarily in what audiences are offered. And actually, as everybody said, viewing habits are changing. And I think watching short content is enormously valuable to people. And my my sense of the market is it would benefit a lot of broadcasters and platforms to make more short content because it speaks to what audiences are keen to engage with. And it also enables us to tell many more stories and to tell the ones that are perceived as risky, which are often the ones, by and about kind of marginalised communities and perspectives, which in many ways are the ones that folks here, I think, we all are keen to see and keen to make, but so hard to sort of get over the line because whatever the messages coming from platforms, there is often a hesitancy about commissioning work that is considered more risky. So I think it's really exciting territory. I would love to see a short before every feature film in the cinema. I actually don't think that's complicated. And if you look at some of the really successful Oscar campaigns, that's what they've done with short form. They've programmed alongside, blockbuster movies, and audiences who wouldn't typically see them have seen them. It's given everybody exposure, and it's a wonderful thing. So I think there are huge opportunities, but they're costly, and they involve a lot of investment and time. So I think we're at a really exciting moment, but it will take an understanding that it's a huge audience opportunity and the money behind it to sort of make it more dynamic. So there are lots of opportunities, but it's not as explosive as I'd love it to be yet.
I think the fact that viewing habits have changed is really to our advantage. So, almost nobody is watching their content on a linear, viewing anymore. And that used to be the problem, I think, that where do you schedule them? There just isn't a slot. You'd have to do, multiples in an hour. But now, most people on Sky watch through on demand, or the sort of front page, or they search for things, or they go to the channel that they like. And it's the same with Netflix or any of the other, even iPlayer. So I think it's absolutely sort of fits with the way that we consume content now to sort of, be a little bit more length agnostic.
Fantastic. I think was there a question over here? Yes, this one at the front here.
Hello. Thank you so much for the panel. I've really thoroughly enjoyed it. I had a question about, after the film is released, a lot of you and a lot of us, I suppose, in the audience are likely to make films about sensitive topics, and the protagonists involved in them may need a certain amount of safeguarding after the film comes out. And Lindsey, you kind of spoke to that a little bit with your Trans in America series. Can you speak a little bit towards that in terms of either experiences that you've had in terms of how you have managed to provide some kind of safeguarding or protection for your protagonists should the films that you've created or the documentaries that you've created, reach audiences that don't agree with the message or the people in the films? And yeah, any suggestions that you might have towards that, and also then with the fund, whether there's anything that Sky are doing to also do that as well.
Do you want to go first?
I mean, what I would say is that, any good documentary maker has always thought about duty of care. Like, it's absolutely, I think some of the panelists here talked about it. It's really the first thing you should be thinking about is those contributors, and are they, have they consented with informed consent, and what have you thought about when the film goes out? But that conversation has just sort of skyrocketed in the last couple of years, and it's absolutely essential on every project that we do at Sky that there is a duty of care protocol. And it will be the same, and that's one of the reasons why these are not sort of go off and make a film for $5,000 type of shorts, which have a real value, but there will be a line, if necessary, if the project needs it, there will be a line in the budget for psychological support, during production and for a certain period of time afterwards. Contributors will get advice from our sort of PR social media team about how to deal with any kind of press inquiries or any negative, Twitter conversation, or, advice about sort of taking yourself off Twitter for, when the project goes out. So yeah, it's really, really important. And just because this is a short, we're not going to cut corners on things like duty of care, legal, all of that. I don't know if any of you want to talk about specific experiences.
I'll just say about my experience. So with learning to skateboard in Warzone through a girl, we work very closely, essentially hand in hand with the organisation that runs the project, that runs the school, and there was nothing that we could do without them, and rightly so. And obviously that, whilst on occasion frustrating on location, happy to put my hand up and say that, it really, really helped when, things went very much off rails, and I just remember thinking, last summer, oh my God, what's happening? And, I knew that the way that we'd made the film, the agreements that we made about, who we would film, how we would present them, et cetera, that was made together with an organisation that had, 10 years plus experience in that country, and that would also be the people that these people would go to, not us, the filmmakers ringing us up, sort of saying, but that there would be somebody that could take care of them and help them deal with the situation. Is it too late? Do I need to move? Et cetera, all that sort of thing. So that's a kind of a super unique situation that you never hope to find yourself in, obviously. In other experiences, in sensitive situations where I've just sort of made direct contact with the contributor, I just think it's, I think I didn't have so much experience with social media and sort of responses about, oh, this is how you see and this is what's going on, but really just kind of touching base, kind of just like being a human about it, So obviously there's the rules and regulations, etc., and we all follow them because we think they're right, but there's also just, these people give us their time, and, we want to, say happy birthday to their kids.
Cherish, you spoke a lot about safeguarding during the filming process, but what about when it comes out?
Yeah, so during the filming process and also in the edit as well. So just letting him know that consent was evolving and open. So, there were things that he said in the interview that he decided he didn't want to go out, and that was totally respected.
It must be frustrating, though, when you've got something good. It's difficulty of being a filmmaker, isn't it?
I mean, he shared so much that it was just like, with what it was a really interesting. There were loads of interesting bits that are not in the film, but I mean, yeah, as long as he was comfortable, because throughout the whole thing, I was just conscious of that, to be honest. So we had conversations after that, and even before Picture Lock, he was involved in the process. And as a friend, just on a personal level, like when it came out, we were having conversations like all the time about, okay, so how is it today? How is it today? And we just have like an open line of communication. But on other projects, so I made a doc for BBC One a couple years ago, and that was a sensitive topic as well. And fortunately, there was the budget to kind of create the space for therapy for the contributor, and that is something that's just super important. And I'm glad to hear that it's being factored in with shorts as well.
Oh, thank you. If I could add briefly just that resourcing that process is so important, so that you're not only planning for it and doing it, but as a filmmaker, you know that if those conversations are continuing a year down the line and they're really intense and demanding, that your time is accounted for. And I think that's one of the challenges with, any of the films that folks are making, but also specifically with films where there is a duty of care issues. It might, it's not going to stop after a month, right? It could continue for a long time. And how do you plan for that so that you're not experiencing kind of burnout and your time is valued as a filmmaker? I think that's really crucial. And it's so exciting that broadcasters like Sky are actually factoring this in. It's so new and it's so necessary. So kind of doing that work collaboratively and doing it in a team it feels really exciting, a really exciting opportunity to kind of share that load and do it responsibly and have those conversations and resource that and go back and forth. It's brilliant.
That is basically our time, unless there's a burning final question. Are you okay? Yeah, okay. I think we can wrap. Thank you so much, all of you. It's been so fantastic. Thank you.